So welcome back, guys. This is our penultimate video, I hope. And what we're looking at in this video is how to implement the voting feature, which we've already done. So we've already ticked that off. So if we go back to here and we open up DieHard, what should happen now is we have our 10 buttons that we can rate with. What we want though is when we push the button, we don't want the whole page to refresh. We just want part of the page to refresh. Now, Django itself is a backend framework. It hasn't implemented the feature yet that only allows us to send a request to the backend and not refresh the whole page. And hopefully that will come in future versions of Django. But until then, what we're going to use is something called HTMX. Now, HTMX allows us to do a lot of JavaScript without writing a lot of JavaScript. And the great thing about it is it allows us to just do that by extending HTML with a few tags. Here in the introduction, it says HTMX gives you access to Ajax, CSS transitions, WebSockets, server-sent events directly in HTML using attributes so you can build modern user interfaces with the simplicity and power of hypertext, which allows us to do a lot of the things like, for example, like buttons and refreshing and animations. And that would have traditionally, we would have to have learned and coded JavaScript to do that. So hopefully this allows us to avoid doing that, or not having to code something in jQuery or using a front-end framework like React, for example. So we're going to change our buttons to use HX post. So to do that, first and foremost, is we have to install HTMX onto our Django project. To do that, if I just load this up and just stop my server for a second, there are a few ways to do it. We can using the website. There is a CDN that we can install. Just include in, but that's not the greatest way to do it. And someone's written a library called Django HTMX. So once this is installed, now that's done. Now we have HTMX installed and running. Now we've got to just adapt these buttons to include HTMX commands. So if we go back to the page here where we said we were going to do a HTMX post. So we're going to create a post request, which we're doing with our button anyway, but we're going to call it using a HX post. So now this says here that we can call the HX post on a button. We're going to do this slightly differently because of the fact that we're submitting a form which includes more than just the data that's included in the button. So if it was just a button with one value, then that would be fine. But we're sending other data alongside our form. So if we take a look at our form, then what we'll do is we'll include the HX post on our form. So we're going to remove the action and we're going to change the form action to a HX post. And I'm going to do this so that I'm doing on all lines again. And if I can just remember, I believe it was Control and Alt. That's correct. So it's actually working and I can do multiple lines now. So we'll say HX dash post equals and what we'll do is we'll say a request dot path. When we say the path, we're actually referring to the actual film details. So when the page is loaded. So now what we're saying is if it's a post request, then it's just going to do this part. And I mean, we were doing that anyway, but we're going to make a small change to this. Okay, so now we have that detail in our form. The next thing we're going to include is the method. I can take this out because when we say HX post, we're doing a post request. That can go. We're actually going to take out CSRF token as well. That's because HTMX has its own way of submitting it. And so the next thing then really is this input that's hidden, that will stay the same. So the film ID has been submitted in the same way. And now it comes to our button here. So we're going to submit just like before. If I just scroll a bit more, we're going to include a HX post, HX dash post. That will refer to now the URL, curly brackets. So URL is going to be that we're going to call films dot f_detail, which was the name of our URL that called our detail page. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to include the ID of the film. So film.id, because that method, if you remember, requires not just a request, but also the primary key. And then what we're going to do is we're going to refer to a target. So I'll explain what that is in a second. So we'll say hx target equals, in fact, I'll try and explain this now. So if you remember our hx target, we have something at the top here called user rating. Okay, so that this div has an ID of user rating. And what we're saying is that the target for the changes that's going to happen here is going to be that hx target. So it's going to refresh that area there. So we're going to go back to hx target. So and we're going to say, because it's an ID, we're going to put in a hash. We're going to say user rating. And then lastly, we're going to add one more thing. We're going to say hx swap. So using HTMX, we want to swap everything inside that div. So we're going to say inner HTML. So swap everything in between. And that's basically it. So from this end, all our buttons have now been modified so that they're going to make a HTMX post. So when we click on the button, it won't refresh the whole page. It will send the requests using HTMX. And now what we want to do is we want to change just that one part. So in our templates folder, we're going to create a new file, and that's going to be inside a directory called partials. And I'm just going to call it user, what should I call it? Let's call it user review, userreview.html. We'll have to remember that name in a second. So in here, what we want is just the output and what it will look like once they've reviewed. So the part of the, if we go back to film detail here, if you remember where we have this if statement, we're saying that if there is a review, it's going to look like this, right? So we want the icon, and then we want the rating. So literally we're just going to take that and we're going to say replace, once the thing has been posted, we're going to replace everything inside this div here with just this. So we're going to go to user rating, and this is our partial. That should be fine. Let's save that. Let's close that. Let's save that. And if we go back to our views now, in our views, we're just going to make a change. So now we're making some changes to this because in the last video, we changed the way all of this was called. And I think what we're going to get away with here actually is just adding a return here. So we're going to say return render, and we'll say render request. But this time we're going to refer to films and then partials, and then it will be user, I believe it was underscore review .html, and obviously we pass through the context as well. Now at this point, the only important part of our context is actually just a rating, because that's the only thing that's going to be changed. It's the only thing being passed on to this. That's important for this template. So I believe that's correct. In fact, what I can now do as well is I could say, if it's not a post request, I could just nest that in there as well. It's not going to make too much difference, but let's save that and let's give it a go. Oh, one more thing, actually. I did say that HTMX has a different way of calling that CSRF token. And the way we do it is just in our base template, we just include it here in our body. So in our body, we're just going to say, boom. There we go. So we'll add HX headers, and that includes our CSRF token. So whenever there's a form request or a post request, then it should include that. So then I think we're done. If we go back to our page now, let's test it out. Let's refresh. Oops. Reverse for details. Okay, I made a mistake. Typo. What page is that on? I believe that was on here. And that was because blah, 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 blah. Where are we? We're here, right? So on each single line here, I put a dot instead of a colon. Let's do that. And let's just delete and do that. Save. And let's refresh. That's it. Our page is loaded. So if we click on rate, it now appears. And let's rate it 9. Oh, okay. So it's done it. The rating's gone in, but we haven't refreshed this area here. Now, why didn't that work? If we refresh the page, okay, so I've come back to VS Code, and when I've looked here, I can see that we've not actually done a post request. I can see rating has gone through as 9, but that's a get request. It's not a post request. So what have I done wrong? Right, I can see what I think I did here actually was I completely forgot to import the JavaScript file. So if we go to the docs, there we go, installing. So we're not going to use a CDN method, but we do need to still pull in where it says download a copy. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to there, and we're going to borrow the JavaScript code, and we're going to embed that into our work. So if we go to static, and let's make a folder for JavaScript. So let's call it js/htmx.min.js. And then we'll just paste in all the JavaScript. Save that. We close it. And then what we've got to do is in our base template, where we have Bootstrap, underneath that we'll include our script for our HTMX. So we're going to say static. So we're going to say from our static directory, we're going to import from the JS folder, we're going to import HTMX.min.js. And I think then that should cover it. So just refresh the page. Boom. There we go. It worked, and it just reloaded just that one part of the page. So now we have that going. Okay, last thing is I really want to make a little change here so that the layout here is a little nicer. So let's close our base, let's close the views. And if we go back to our detail page, let's start looking from that alert. And then from within that alert, I want to section things out a bit. So within the alert, I want to create a row. So let's say div.row. And then inside the row, let's fill it out with some columns, right? So we're going to say div.column, and let's try space it out evenly. So I'm going to say call free, and good. So we're doing Bootstrap columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I just want the text part in my first column. So I'm going to take that and stick that there. So we could do it like this. I like to nest things. Okay, so there's my first column. Then in my row, my next column, again, I want it to be div.column. Let's just do that. Say -3. So in my next column, I want to be able to include the icon and the film average rating. So that would be this stuff here. Yeah, let's say the icon and the film average rating, and we'll stick that into our next column. In fact, what I'll do is I want this to be in separate rows. So let's put this, let's take that and cut that. Let's put it in a p tag like that. And then what I want is this next part. I want that in a p tag of its own, so on a new row. I want the average film rating to be on the same row. That's what I wanted. I want that to be in the same row as the icon, but on the next one, I want the number of reviews, and I don't want that. Let's make a capital R there. I want the number of reviews to be on a new line, but you know what? I think this would be nicer if this was smaller. So let's change that. Let's add a class of small. Okay, so that's our next row. And then what we'll do is we will take another div dot 6. So this will be our remaining column now. And our remaining column will include everything else. So where are we? We don't have a call there. And let's just grab this stuff here. I believe, is it everything from user rating? No, let's say your rating. Yeah, let's say your rating. And then I can chuck all this stuff in. So where's this closing div? There we go. Let's cut that out and let's put that there. And I think that looks all right. Let's remove some of the spaces. How does it look when we refresh? Refresh. Okay. Is there too much of a gap there? Or maybe I needed more of a gap here. Anyway, it's looking better. I like the way, in fact, to be honest, maybe your rating should be, maybe, yeah, you know what? I think this bit here should be here. So it's spaced out a tiny bit more. So let's, where did we have that column of 6? There we are. Let's make that 3 columns again. This is what we're going to do. We're going to close that div there. I'm going to say, close the div. And then what we'll do is we'll open another div here. So we'll say div dot -3. And so then this stuff, we can get rid of that. We have a closing div at the bottom already. How does that look? Okay. Not bad. And if there isn't a rating, let's get rid of a rating. I just want to make sure the button is in the correct place. Let's go back, refresh. That works for me. That works for me. Okay, so that's not bad. So your rating goes there. And then once you've added a rating, yeah, that's fine. So I think that ties up this video as well. So we've done our voting. That leaves us with hopefully just one more little video. So if we go to here and we look at what we've achieved, we can say we have used HTMX to add a no refresh voting for films. And then what we do is we do these two together. It's basically one thing. So we're going to use HTMX to filter genre, and that will be hopefully our last video. Yeah, so I'll see you guys then.